Consider this. The same person who introduced you to the industry and helped put you on is now compelled to defend himself as the streets remain silent. This is no longer merely a rap drama, this is a test of loyalty. Many people believed that Pooh Shiesty's initial exposure of Gucci Mane was just another online myth. What's going on now? Nope, things are becoming serious. From Memphis to Atlanta, discussions have been triggered by Gucci Mane's response or, more significantly, his silence. Everywhere there is a resounding inquiry. In this case, who is truly at fault? Pooh Shiesty wasn't the only one signed by Gucci Mane. He included him in his legacy. However, genuine intentions are always exposed when celebrity, wealth, and power are involved. According to industry insiders, labels are exerting pressure, camps are splitting, and formerly confidential matters are now coming to light. The streets are keeping a watchful eye on everything. Who is voicing their opinions? Is anyone remaining silent? Silence also makes a statement in hip-hop. Is Gucci Mane shielding his reputation? Or is there anything more profound that he is still unable to discuss? Supporters of Pooh Shiesty, meanwhile, think the truth has finally come to light. The side of Gucci Mane maintains that the truth has not been revealed. However, it is evident that this fallout extends beyond the two artists. It serves as a warning to the whole sector. You'll see why the streets are picking sides and why this conflict is far from resolved by the end of this movie. The timing, which picks up where the hook left off, is what makes this situation even more problematic. Pooh Shiesty isn't speaking in an attempt to gain notoriety or influence. His voice is powerful at this particular moment, even without speaking, and the culture is compelled to pause and pay attention when someone like that accuses the same person, who paved the way for their success. Gucci Mane has been regarded as a kingmaker for many years. Gucci's reputation has been established by identifying undeveloped street talent and transforming it into mainstream power. As demonstrated by Waka Flocka, Young Thug, and Pooh Shiesty, it felt like history was being repeated when Pooh Shiesty entered the scene under 1017 Records. Gucci Mane was once again positioned as the driving force behind Memphis's ascent to fame. It appeared that way from the outside. Anyway, people familiar to the situation claim that things weren't as easy as fans thought behind the scenes. Control, expectations, and contracts began to become actual points of contention. Another artist was not Pooh Shiesty. He was evolving into a voice for a new generation, a movement, and a brand. And questions always begin to come up with that type of momentum. What is actually owned by whom? Who stands to gain the most? Furthermore, who is being kept back? According to sources, interactions between Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane allegedly shifted as his fame increased. Slowly, what had initially felt like mentoring began to feel more like business-only communication. Frustration was silently growing, as decisions were being made without complete openness. Silence like that is deadly in hip-hop because it breaks loudly when it does. That leads us to Pooh Shiesty's decision to reveal what he believed had been kept too long a secret. He didn't come out shouting or furiously angry. Rather, the tone was deliberate, cool, and under control. People could tell this wasn't an emotional outburst only from that. The streets saw that this was calculated. Fans started going back to previous interviews, songs, and messages on social media right away. Suddenly, each Gucci Mane phrase felt unique. Each Pooh Shiesty bar sounded as though it had a deeper significance. What had appeared to be loyalty suddenly felt dubious. Was Gucci Mane prioritizing the protection of his own empire over providing his artist with complete support? Gucci Mane's response or lack thereof came next. In the history of hip-hop, reactions are typically loud. Instagram postings, interviews, diss tunes, etc. Gucci Mane, however, took his time clearing the air, and that silence was more devastating than any insult could have been, because when a veteran remains silent in the face of accusations, people begin to believe that they have something to conceal. According to certain insiders, Gucci Mane is acting strategically. He is aware that everything he says could be used against him financially, legally, or publicly because he is an experienced industry figure. Some contend that remaining silent serves as a power tactic to remind everyone of who actually has the most influence. Silence, however, seems like avoidance to the streets. At that point, sides start to emerge. The majority of Memphis supporters support Pooh Shiesty because they believe he navigated a talent-exploiting industry while remaining loyal to his roots. By citing Gucci Mane's extensive history of putting artists on and providing them with opportunities they might not have otherwise had, Atlanta fans, on the other side, continue to support the brand. It's not only Memphis versus Atlanta, though. This is student against teacher, artist against label, and, in many respects, generation against generation. Younger artists are keeping a careful eye on this situation because it mirrors their long-standing anxieties. The worry that after the value is retrieved, it will be signed, packaged, and controlled only to be thrown away. The legal specter also looms large over everything. The situation of Pooh Shiesty adds still another level of intricacy. Some people think that because of his position, it is simpler for people to talk for or against him without fear of rapid retaliation. Fans are unable to overlook that disparity in power. Executives in the industry are apparently uncomfortable in the meantime. This kind of situation affects more than simply two names. They cause artists to doubt agreements, partnerships, and trust. A prominent mentorship's public breakup sends a statement. No matter how close anything appears on video, nothing is certain. The entire narrative hasn't been revealed yet. According to Gucci Mane's crew, they assert that certain obligations were not fulfilled and that loyalty is reciprocal. They contend that being signed entails more than just freedom and notoriety, it also entails structure, regulations, and restrictions. According to that viewpoint, discipline might be what Pooh Shiesty perceives as control. Supporters of Pooh Shiesty, however, have a different perspective. For them, this is a quintessential example of an artist surpassing the framework that first presented him. They think that for reasons unrelated to music, his voice was being restrained, his timing regulated, and his potential postponed. The true stress in this situation is that because animosity grows when a creative feels silenced, delayed, or overly controlled. And exposure is unavoidable when opportunity and resentment eventually collide. More artists are quietly weighing in by like postings, unfollowing profiles, or posting cryptic captions as the internet discourse intensifies. Those insignificant acts have a big impact in today's society. Everyone is listening, but nobody wants to be the first to speak honestly. This is evident. Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane's relationship has evolved beyond business. It's intimate. Hip-hop personal disputes also rarely end amicably. This is not yet the climax. It serves as the cornerstone, because in the following stage, the charges get more obvious. The specifics become more precise, and the pressure compels reactions that are no longer avoidable. The streets are already drawing inferences, regardless of Gucci Mane's decision to speak or remain silent. And there's no turning back once the streets make their decision. Additionally, there isn't an undo button once the streets make their decision, because the story then takes precedence over the facts. It becomes a belief. That's precisely where things go from here. Subtle gestures begin to speak louder than words, as silent stress becomes apparent fissures. Fans saw subtle but significant changes shortly after the aftermath was made public. Old pictures vanished. Quietly, mutual follows disappeared. Once shouting out both sides, affiliates now choose to use delicate terminology or none at all. These aren't coincidences in hip-hop. They serve as signals. According to insiders, meetings were taking on behind the scenes. Managers, attorneys, and label representatives all intervened to attempt to stop the damage before it got out of hand. Because the stakes quickly increase once a story like this transcends the artist level and reaches the business side. Contracts represent more than simply music. They also represent long-term leverage, branding agreements, and millions of dollars. Pooh Shiesty's position made matters even more tricky. His lack of public appearances created an odd imbalance in the situation. He was unable to go live on Instagram. He was unable to conduct interviews. This meant that people could talk about him without being corrected right away. Supporters contend that the fact that there was silence and consequence instead of commotion after his earlier remarks made them much more impactful. Gucci Mane remained silent at the same moment. No explicit denials, no direct statements, and that was disconcerting for a culture that relies on reaction. Some admirers started taking his reserved demeanor as assurance. The composure of someone who is aware of the truth will ultimately come to the surface. Others viewed it as a planned stall to buy time for the story to settle. It did not, however, cool down. Industry insiders instead started to imply that the dispute was about more than just respect. Control, release dates, approval, authority, and long-term ownership were at issue. These are the actual fault lines that ruin relationships behind closed doors, but are rarely acknowledged in public. An artist's creativity becomes frustrated when they feel confined. Authority tightens when a label is perceived as being contested. Pooh Shiesty wanted more autonomy, or more flexibility to maneuver while momentum was high. According to sources close to the matter, time was important to him. Delays can ruin a hip-hop career more quickly than poor music these days. With each pause, you run the risk of losing the audience's interest, relevancy, and connection. The reasoning is different from the label side. Longevity is protected by structure. Value is protected by timing, strategic, not emotional. Moves are required, and there are repercussions for breaking the rules. Relationships frequently break down at this point, where mentoring finishes and management begins. Loyalty turned into a weapon on both sides, as these two ideologies clashed. Gucci Mane supporters noted that chances are not given away for free. There are expectations when one is first introduced to the industry. They maintained that success does not negate responsibility and that thankfulness is important. Supporters of Pooh Shiesty retorted with an alternative query. When does thankfulness become silent? When does being loyal imply standing up for what's right rather than following the crowd? That question quickly gained traction. All of a sudden, there were more than two artists involved. Since nearly every artist has the same anxiety, younger rappers started paying close attention and deciphering the meaning. Being bound by an agreement that is advantageous to everyone but oneself, and witnessing such a high-profile event confirmed those anxieties. The media, meanwhile, added fuel to the flames. The headlines were overblown. Videos were removed from their original context. All of Pooh Shiesty's recorded lyrics were re-examined as if they were proof. Every Gucci Mane quotation from the past reappeared with a fresh meaning. It grew more difficult to distinguish truth from story. The responses from the camps followed. Both sides' representatives started using indirect language. Just ambiguous posts about loyalty, treachery, and phony love no names. No affirmations. However, everyone understood exactly who they were referring to. Because they stimulate conjecture, indirect shots frequently cause more harm than direct ones in today's society. The pressure was inevitable at this point. Gucci Mane was now in a difficult situation. Talking could make things worse. He might appear guilty if he remained mute. Both actions were risky. This was nothing new for someone who has lived through several periods of the industry. However, the optics had changed. Social media is impatient. Fans want things to happen right away. The issue was just as complicated for Pooh Shiesty. His voice was still little, but his fans were loud. Because of this, there was a void in which others built the narrative for him. Accuracy varies from time to time. Furthermore, even the truth finds it difficult to emerge once a story has been constructed enough times. The lack of confidence was what made this phase risky, not simply between two people, but also between the system and artists. The harm went far beyond a single brand or name when fans started screaming, "This is why you can't trust labels." Executives noticed. Other artists saw, and behind closed doors, deals started to be questioned. Terms were reread, and lawyers were consulted, because if it can occur here, it can occur anywhere. Meanwhile, several voices called for prudence. They reminded audiences that not all fallouts require a villain, that mentorship is complex, and that commercial disputes do not always equate to treachery. However, emotion always travels more quickly than words, and those voices found it difficult to compete with it. One thing became clear as the weeks went by. In public, Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane's friendship was irreparable. The harm to impression had already been done, even if private discussions were taking place. In hip-hop, perception is reality. Explosion was not yet the focus of this phase. It has to do with pressure. Decisions that could no longer be postponed were forced by tight, continuous, and oppressive pressure. The neutrality of silence was broken. Every action or lack thereof became a statement. It wasn't whether or not someone would speak at last. It was how difficult and when, because this story will no longer be based on conjecture once the next word is spoken and the next element is revealed. There will be repercussions. Real ones that change careers. And that's the point at which everything formally crosses the line. Furthermore, there's no control over what happens after quiet fails. The issue finally reaches that point. The point at which public pressure causes a quiet approach to fail. Every action has unavoidable repercussions. There was not a single explosive utterance that reached the breaking point. It arrived in fragments. The change in tone came first. Fans observed a shift in the discourse surrounding Gucci Mane. There was still respect, but it was tinged with suspicion. What he had done was not being questioned. They wanted to know why he wasn't answering. Veterans are expected to confront challenges head-on in hip-hop culture. Once regarded as a sign of strength, silence was now perceived as avoidance. At the same time, Pooh Shiesty's name continued to be popular due to connotation rather than music. The longer it went without a retort, the heavier his previous remarks felt. Advocates contended that they would have been shut down right away if the allegations were untrue. The silence harmed Gucci Mane's reputation the longer it lasted. Alliances began to fall apart at that point. Loosely affiliated artists started making more informed decisions. The teasing of studio cooperation ceased. Appearances at events became selective. Rumor had it that even producers, who often maintained their neutrality, were picking their collaborators more carefully. All of this was observed, even though it wasn't disclosed. The pressure peaked behind the scenes. When industry insiders started speaking anonymously, that's when things really went too far. Podcasts suggested that artists were being held back by mentors. Commentators cited traditional control strategies. The timing made it clear who they were referring to, even if no identities were formally confirmed. The point of no return was that, once solely determined by opportunity and influence, Gucci Mane's legacy was now under discussion, questioned rather than deleted or denied. And that kind of debate resonates more deeply than any diss track for someone who established his reputation on respect in the business and credibility in the streets. In the meantime, Pooh Shiesty's persona changed completely. He was no longer only regarded as an artist. That role carried weight because he was being portrayed as an example, a cautionary tale, someone younger artists could point to and say, "This is what happens when business and loyalty collide." His supporters presented him as someone who raised his voice despite the dangers, publicly discussing concerns, according to critics, burns bridges that cannot be restored. However, one thing was acknowledged even by critics. It is impossible for the truth or even the notion of truth to remain unsaid once it is revealed. The response from the industry was subdued but grave. Labels grew more circumspect. During discussions, executives allegedly posed more challenging questions. Artists asked for more precise language. There was a tremendous ripple effect. Such circumstances alter conduct in addition to harming relationships. And for that reason, this consequence was significant outside of the news. Containment became Gucci Mane's challenge. Containment, not damage management. How can a legacy be preserved without growing hostilities? How do you reply without confirming assertions? Every choice has a drawback. The problem for Pooh Shiesty was representation. Loudly, but without his direct voice, his followers spoke. Without complete confirmation, the story kept changing. The plot gained strength from that absence, but it also carried risk, because narratives that have been created by others seldom remain true. One thing became evident as the weeks went by. The public no longer believed that reconciliation was possible. Despite the possibility of a private accord, the optics were too shattered. Once questioned, trust is difficult to regain, particularly in public. The last shift then arrived. Instead of asking what happened, people began to question what would happen next. That's the true indication that a story has progressed from explanation to consequence. Future plans were conjectured about by fans. Would it be addressed by Gucci Mane at last? Will Pooh Shiesty's side provide additional information? Would someone else intervene and reveal everything? At this point, silence had raised expectations too high, so even a tiny comment would be explosive. Winning was no longer the goal. It was about long-term posture, image, credibility, and survival. Errors don't automatically spell the end of a hip-hop career. Perception can sometimes modify them, and perception has already locked in. The streets were no longer indecisive. They had taken sides based on emotion rather than necessarily on evidence. Furthermore, sentiment frequently prevails over facts in this culture. The true effect of this fallout is that a permanent change in the way two names are used in the same sentence, not a disdain, a lawsuit, or even a public dispute. Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane will always be connected by this event, as well as by history. A time when quiet was viewed with mistrust, mentorship encountered opposition, and loyalty was no longer taken for granted. At this point, the narrative ends with division rather than conclusion, because some fallouts terminate in distance rather than loudly. Furthermore, in hip-hop, silence is more powerful than words. Now is the time to speak up if you have been watching the story develop, because circumstances such as these do not simply vanish. Rather, they influence the culture. It's not just about Gucci Mane and Pooh Shiesty. It's about power, loyalty, and the real workings of the music industry behind the scenes. Here's the question then. Which side do you support, and why? Was this an instance of a mentor being misinterpreted in a commercially oriented field, or was it an artist at last advocating for himself? Because the streets are already speaking, and your voice is a part of that discourse. Please share your ideas in the comments section. Click like if you think artists should have greater access to the public. It makes this story more accessible to those who are interested in the actual world outside of music. Make sure you subscribe and enable notifications if you don't want to miss the next breakdown, in which we discuss the long-term effects of this collapse and what it implies for next artists. Clickbait and rumors have no place here. Our goal is to provide you with the complete picture that the mainstream media ignores by connecting the dots and dissecting the facts. Real discussions, in-depth perspectives, and fresh news all in one location. Give this video to someone who is aware of hip-hop's deeper meanings. Someone who understands that every popular song has a business choice and occasionally a strained relationship behind it. Because the next phase of this story could permanently alter your perspective of the industry.